Let's discuss immigration, whether it's been a good thing or a bad thing for the UK, and what's happening post-Brexit to our balance of trade with Europe and the rest of the world. To begin with immigration. Now, a man called Philip Ullman wrote a piece in the business pages of the Telegraph this morning. He describes himself as a former chief executive of one of the country's largest employment agencies. I had over 100,000 people working for me every year, the majority of which came from EU expansion countries. And he says there is this narrative that we have to have a continual stream of people coming into our country. It's good for GDP. We have an ageing population. We couldn't possibly cope. The Brits are all too thick and lazy and fat and useless to work. And that's the justification that we get. And that it's really good for the economy. And you will hear that everywhere. But Philip Ullman says the results are clear. Immigration has been dangerously harming our economy. And the point he's making are that GDP per capita has not gone up. Of course, GDP goes up. The economy is bigger because there are more people in it. But our productivity has fallen so much, we're now considerably below that of France. And he makes the point that actually there's been a race to the bottom over these last 20 years. And that the idea that now a family of four could be supported on one income is frankly for the birds for millions and millions of people. I'd hope with Brexit that we would genuinely start to change this culture around. We get manifesto commitments to do it, but it never, ever happens. Now, I'm joined by Stephen Hunsaker, researcher at UK in a Changing Europe. And Stephen, whether it's immigration, whether it's trade, we're dealing with a post-Brexit Britain. And I mentioned already that I'd hope numbers would come down and we'd upskill, and it hasn't happened yet. I'd also hope that with trade, that we would start to do more trade around the rest of the world. Your figures out today suggest we're not really doing that.
That's correct. It's actually quite interesting to see is that as a total share of UK trade, the EU makes up now more than it did all the way going back till 2008, actually. And so that's quite a surprising number. And when we look at that, that sounds on the surface like that's saying that trade with the EU has been going up. When in reality, actually, it's that trade with non-EU countries has been going down recently. And so what that is this is something that both sides were kind of wrong about. We had a lot of economists that were saying that there was going to be a cliff edge, that Brexit was going to cause trade with the EU to, just fall off and was going to damage the UK economy. And the other side was saying that, well, Brexit is going to allow us to boost trade with our non-UK partners and see new growth and expansion. And pretty much what these results show is that neither side were right. We're seeing stability, if not stagnation, with the EU, but then we're not seeing that growth happen with non-EU countries.
No. Despite the fact we've signed a whole series of new trade deals, we inherited some from the European Union, but signed some of our own. No, it's funny this, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, it's good news, as you say, because our trade with Europe's not really been damaged at all. I mean, people want our goods and we want theirs and we go on doing business. But it is bad news because I've always taken the view that, yes, the European market's next door, and that's helpful in many ways. But in terms of global GDP, in terms of the global pie, it's about 15% of the world. It'll be 10% of the world in 5 years' time. And it's the new markets where the growth is. So what is it? What do you think we're getting wrong here?
I think that, for one, that the government has really focused on these trade deals being PR successes. Quickly get them out, make sure that they look like really good deals. But the problem is that they're not looking hard enough at the substance at many of these. These trade deals, for one, are maybe being overpromised that they're going to have immediate impacts or are going to immediately benefit. These take time. Imagine if there's a UK business that is trading a lot with Germany, but all of a sudden here's that Australia opens up. They're going to start maybe looking into building those trade relations with them, but that takes time to build that, to find a clientele and everything. And so they're not going to see immediate results. And to promise that, I think, is misleading the public.
Well, that's called politics, yes.
Yeah, true.
But isn't the truth of it also, whether you have a trade deal or not, there are many profitable trading relationships, even where there's tariff involved.
That's true.
If you've got a product that somebody wants to buy at a price they think's acceptable, they will buy it anyway. Clearly, we're not making the right products.
Well, I think we need to look at where our strengths are. The thing is that the UK of the 80s is not the UK now as far as what was the big things. If we look at the research that we've done at UK and Changing Europe, services are one of the biggest strengths. The numbers are actually looking really good with the UK with services. It's been very resilient and has been really going up and has been kind of keeping our trade up. And so I think what it needs to look at is that we need to look at
services being insurance, products like that?
Financial, yes, exactly. It's not as much the construction of that product as it is the selling of the services, the softwares, the consulting, those other governments. We have a lot of expertise. We have a lot of knowledge.
We're good at legal services.
Exactly.
We provide a lot of medical services. Now, there are many things we're good at, but what about manufacturing? Because we keep hearing the story that British manufacturing is doing rather better than we think.
That is a difficult one, and I think that's one that there's a lot of factors that are going into it that makes it hard to say. Where one is that within manufacturing, we need to look to the future, and where that is that regardless of what party it is, a lot is going towards green manufacturing, whether it's for our country or for another country. And so looking at how we can be competitive within this new sector, somewhat new sector, but, this very booming sector is where is a place that the UK can set itself out and differentiate instead of trying to just simply copy what other countries. The UK can't compete with the US or its new subsidies on many of those things. It needs to find areas where it has strengths or where it could very easily have strengths and use I
suppose I could counter that by saying what we could do is produce a lot more oil and gas and export it, which would run counter to that narrative.
It would.
But trade is still trade. Stephen, thank you for coming in. It's, as I say, it's a good news story and it's a bad news story.
It is.
The good news story, folks, is there was no cliff edge. Brexit has not led to a catastrophic fall in business with the European Union. It frankly was never going to. The disappointment is we're not taking more advantage of our potential on the world stage. But a lot of that isn't about politics. A lot of that is about the products we are manufacturing that are not being bought in the numbers that our economy needs.